Shalom and welcome to this week's Living Torah. Before I get into the Torah portion this week, we've had a great week with Hanok. He's going to be here for a few more days. I really urge you to listen to the Israel update this week, as we'll be talking a lot about what has been happening recently in recent days, and the way things are going on a day-by-day basis, moment by moment, things could be changing in Israel. This past Shabbat, as we were about to meet at Life Assembly, got the report that at that time it was just a rocket that had come into a Druze neighborhood in northern Israel in the Golan Heights, and the eventual news was that 12 had been killed, 12 children. Now understand that they are Druze, they're not Jewish. The Druze religion, and I'm planning possibly to do an interview with Hanok for next month's next month's message from our ministry, and we're going to talk a little bit more about who the Druze are. But they are an offshoot of Islam, but are very loyal to the country in which they are living in. It has been through the years a pretty secretive religion. So when it comes down to this thing, well, it's the Jews that are occupying. I think that kind of falls a little short. So 12 children killed in this, and my question is, where is the international uprising? Where is the rage? Where is this? It is non-existent. Why? Because it is still about Israel, the Jewish people, and the genocide of a complete people and anyone who will stand with them. Also on the Israel update, I believe that Hanok and I will be talking about a wonderful experience we had this past Sunday night at Moss Memorial Baptist Church in Hayesville, North Carolina, and it was great. I mean, it was amazing. So tune in for that. Other things that are going on, of course, and I think I might be talking to Barry about this on Foundations for Life. I've got to, spread everything over the programs that we do. But the outrage that there was on social media regarding the drag queens and all this that happened in at the Olympics. But my question to people is this: if you were outraged over the opening presentation, but yet watch, I'm not trying to judge anybody, just if this is you, I'm not judging, I'm just asking the questions. If a person was so outraged over the events in that opening, whatever they did, but then hey, I'm going to watch the Olympics. This is kind of like going and condemning grandma because she has a Christmas tree, but willingly going to the bank and cashing the check that she gave you in the Merry Christmas envelope. All right, where is the conviction here? Is it, when it's convenience? Or is conviction truly conviction? All right, so that's a program with Barry, but it does bring us into this week's Torah portion, which is Matot, or tribes, and it says in this chapter 30 of Bamidbar. We're almost to the end of the book of Numbers. We'll be going in just a couple of weeks to Moses' last sermon, in which I get to tell people, you think I was long-winded, okay? In Bamidbar, chapter 30, verse 1 or 2, depending on your translation, I'm actually going to go to verse 3. When a man makes an oath to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, or formally obligates himself by swearing an oath, he is not to break his word, but is to do everything he said he would do. Just a couple of little nuances of this. The word vow in Hebrew is nun dalet resh. Nun dalet resh. Now you may be connecting a little bit here in that the word devar is is Dalet, Beit Resh. So we do see some similarities with the word for that we translate vow and the word that we translate word. So our vow is linked to our word, but in Hebrew, the word debar not only means word, it also means thing. So when he spoke, when the Creator spoke the word and things came into existence, it's the same word. There's no difference in the word. So a word and a thing is synonymous. What does this tell us? I think I could relate it to this, that it is talking, our vow is talking about the importance of what we say, yes, but not only what we say, but what we do, our actions. This is to go back to Christian theology that has been through the years, going over to the book of Romans. If you confess Yeshua as your Messiah, believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be redeemed, okay? The problem we have with this is that in that verse, it has been taken in a Greek context. See, in a Greek context, you can separate your actions from your words. Well, it depends on what the definition of the word is. It depends on the context of something. No, your actions and your word is the same thing in a Hebrew context. So when it says in that verse in Romans, if you believe in your heart, that is your innermost being, which is your, we could call it your doer. So if your actions are not lining up with your words, then in essence, you don't believe your words. It's just air. It is just hot air coming out of your mouth, because it doesn't matter what you're saying you're going to do. What matters is what you are going to do or are doing at the time, which is the reason that I don't spend very much of my time listening to politicians' speeches. Why? Because I know they're lying. I know that for the most part, most politicians, and there are some exceptions to this rule, yes, and there are exceptions within the rule, but for the most part, I understand that a politician standing up in front of a camera or in front of a crowd is lying to me. That's how I'm going to go into it. And then if on the other end they actually do something that they said, I'm going to stand in total amazement. Well, that's one thing when talking about a politician, but, let me tell you, I see that in the world in general today. I've had so many people, I had a friend of mine in New Mexico a number of years ago. We met, and we were discussing some things, and he wanted to do some expansion of his business, and it was going to involve, I told him we could do that with podcast. First thing he said was, what's a podcast? This was a number of years ago. And I said, well, this is what we could do. He says, how do I do that? I said, don't worry about it. I'll do it for you. And we worked out a few things. And I walked away knowing that he knew in his mind that I wasn't going to do anything. And it surprised him when I came back and said, okay, we got it all set up. We're ready to go. And he just looked at me like, what? Because let's face it, folks, when somebody tells you they're going to do something, do you really expect it to be done? How many people do you have in your life that when they tell you something, you really expect it to be done? I would say that probably the numbers are pretty low. Why? Because words in our day are cheap. They don't really mean anything. And Yeshua, actually going over to the book of Matthew, Yeshua talked about this in Matthew chapter 5. You want to follow along here. It says in verse 33, again, you have heard that our fathers were told, do not break your oath and keep your vows to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. But I tell you not to swear at all by heaven, because it is Elohim's throne, by the earth, because it is his footstool, not by Yerushalayim, because it is the city of the great king, and don't swear by your head, because you can't make a single hair white or black. Don't we know that? Just let your yes be a simple yes, and your no a simple no. Anything more than this has the origin in evil. I'll take you back to childhood, all right? How many of us, and I've known adults that have done this. I really don't want to use the word stupidity here, and I shouldn't, but it probably works pretty well. But remember, oh, I had my fingers crossed. And so you figured out a person that was going to tell you something, and you knew that they were going to cross their fingers. So you said, let me see your hands. Now, the very basis of this, as a childhood exercise here, the very basis is that child had already been learned from somewhere that their words really didn't mean anything. And so you would say, okay, let me see your fingers. No, both hands, come on. And then the person didn't do it. Well, I have my legs crossed. Really? How much of an extreme will a person go to cheapen their words? Which, by the way, if your words are an expression of your being and produce things in the earth as it was with the Creator, then when we cheapen our words, we're really cheapening our very being. In the end, my counsel to people is this: let your words and your actions be one. Do not make a vow hastily. When someone says, well, I'm going to tell you the truth. You know what that means? When I hear the words, when somebody says, well, to tell you the truth, or, well, I'm not lying, it's just a joke. I know I did that. Yeah, no, not a lie. It's not a joke. I'm telling the truth. What that means to me is that I expect you to lie. And you expect you to lie. Think about that. When someone uses words like that, what does it mean? It means they're expecting that I've got to differentiate in my mind. Am I really telling the truth or a lie? So let your yes be yes. Let your no be no. And leave it at that. You don't need to swear on your mother's grave, which is the root of that, as Yeshua would say, is evil. You don't have to swear on whatever, just yes or no. And then follow through with the yes or the no. Now, one more place regarding this in Ecclesiastes, and I've already marked that page. So Ecclesiastes chapter 3 is the infamous set of verses on, for everything there's a season and time for everything under heaven. And it goes down into verse 7 and says, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. Learning to be silent is probably more important than learning when to speak or learning what to speak. I've dealt with this in ministry through the years, specifically in hospitals or at a time of a funeral, and I've threatened. I've never said I was going to do this, but I've threatened to write a book about things that people say when they shouldn't have said anything. That would be a great title. What do people say when they shouldn't have said anything? I'll take you to a hospital, to a hospital room, ICU. Somebody is hooked up to all kinds of things, and they're unconscious. And someone walks in the room and says, "Well, they look pretty good." Really? You really think so? Or they look at the loved ones they're mourning already the loss, the probable loss of their loved one. Well, in just a few minutes they're going to be going to a better place. And they'll say the same thing at a funeral. Okay, the person's there in the coffin, they're dead. Well, they're in a better place. Wow, don't they look nice? They look so real. Well, what did you expect them to look like? Okay? There's times, think about it, read through the book of Job. Job's friends did really well until they opened their mouths. And then everything pretty much went downhill from there regarding the counsel to Job. So learning when to be silent, learning when to speak, are important things in this world. But with that being said, verse 5 or 6, depending on translation, but if on the day her father hears it, and this is speaking specifically to a minor living in her father's house, he expresses his disapproval, then none of her vows or obligations she has bound herself to will stand, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh will forgive her because her father expressed his disapproval. But if he remains silent, he can't come back and later on and say, well, I didn't really approve of what she said, but I remained silent. See, silence in the end is agreement. I heard a person attended a meeting. Nobody here knows about this, okay? So it's not you if you're listening. Attended a meeting not long ago, a few years, and in the end, there was a lot of disagreement in the room. Again, I'm not going to give details enough here, but so somebody can pinpoint this. But there was some disagreement. There was some questions in the room that were just really they were not appropriate questions, and it left some issues with everybody in the room. And a person afterwards said to me that afternoon, said, well, I agreed with this person. Okay, so what? Yeah, I agreed with most everything they said, but you didn't say anything. Well, no, I didn't. Which means nobody that was there knows. I'm getting all the aircraft intrusions. If you see me looking over at my phone here, I've got the red alert on, and the amount of rockets and they're going into Israel right now. I'm going to get to that. I'm going to just kind of segue into that in just a moment. So nobody in the room knew that this person disagreed with the questions, agreed with the speaker, and so their silence, what did it mean? It meant absolutely nothing. Because to be silent is to be complacent, is to be complicit, is to be a part, it is a confirmation. Well, it's a confirmation that you really don't stand for anything because, let's take this to Gaza, and my phone continues to go off here with red alert. Let's take this to what is going on in Israel. I was talking to Hanok the other day, He said he was in with a church, a congregation, I can't remember where it was. And someone said, well, we stand with Israel. And he looked at him and said, okay, that's great. So what are you doing? And they said, well, nothing. Let me get this right. You stand with Israel, but you're doing nothing. You're saying nothing. Nobody knows you're standing with Israel. So what does it mean that you're standing with Israel? It means nothing. We went to Moss Memorial Baptist Church the other night. I'll give you this little one. Some very close friends of mine and Kathy's attend our congregation and also go to Moss Memorial on Sunday. They actually were going there before they found Life Assembly. And so I had talked to the pastor back in February. He invited Hanok to come in. We set it up for this time. And so Hayesville, North Carolina is not a really huge place to begin with, but I put it in my GPS, and it would not give me the directions to Moss Memorial Baptist Church. It said Moss Memorial Baptist Church Cemetery. So I'm just thinking, okay, well, hopefully the church and the cemetery are at the same location. So we drive out there, and this is a place I know about. It's a golf course, past a golf course that I've played a few times. And we turn off the road, and it still says we're like 6 or 7 miles from the church. Now, anybody that knows anything about North Carolina in this area I live in, 6 or 7 miles can be 20 minutes because it's narrow roads, windy roads. We exported all of our straight roads to Oklahoma many years ago. And so we're driving down these roads, and I'm like, I'm not sure if there's anything at the end of this besides a cemetery. Well, I looked up, and here's the church. There is a steeple, and I found out some interesting details about this. It goes back to Rita Hayworth, by the way. Again, me and Hanok probably talk about this on the update, or if I do an interview with him. It's fascinating. But here's this church. The steeple is taller than the church is wide and long, I think. But right in front is a flagpole. There's like 3 flagpoles, about 50 feet tall. One of them has an American flag on it, and the other one has an Israel flag on it. And we're looking at this, and as you're driving toward it, the Israel flag, interesting enough, is the first thing you see. And this friend of mine, Paul, had told me, he said, make sure that you tell Hanok that flag was not just put up for him, but right after October 7th, Charlie, the pastor of this church, said, we're putting up an Israel flag. So they put up a pole, and they put up a flag, and it's tragic, but I have seen very seldom the support in numerous things that they said that they were doing, not just saying. I have very rarely seen in Messianic Hebrew roots congregations the type of support and the great questions that were asked from that I saw the other night there in Hayesville. So let our silence be appropriate, but let our words and actions match, and let us learn when to be silent and when to be very loud in what we do and say. May our oath line up with our words and our actions. Now, briefly in chapter 31, Moshe is told on behalf of the people of Israel, take vengeance over the Midianim. After that, you will be gathered to your people. If you notice in this chapter, that it is the father of Cosbi and also Balaam that dies. What's this all about? Well, we have politicians. I don't like to get political a lot, but you know, I think everybody, most everybody, if you've lived your life by any type of purpose, you start getting toward the end of your life, and you start thinking about, what will I give? What will be my legacy? You know, will my life mean anything past the 4 or 5 minutes of somebody grieving? And 4 or 5 minutes, I've seen that actually. So will it really mean anything? What will my legacy be? Well, at this point, the legacy of Moshe is that he struck the rock and is not going to be going into the land of Canaan. The Almighty himself is interested in the legacy of Moshe, because the last thing that he tells Moshe to do is, you fight a war. Now, he's not going to go out and fight. It says, on behalf of the people of Israel, take vengeance on the Midianite, and then you'll be gathered to your people. And so the last thing on the agenda, we see this in politics today. We've got what's called a lame duck president. What's he trying to do? He's trying to get a legacy, which, again, I'm not going to go there. But for Moshe, the last thing that he's remembered by is the defeat of the Midianite and the killing of Balaam and the father of Cosby, Zor, who caused all of this to happen in last week's Torah portion and the one before. Now, difficult set of scriptures here, starting in verse 14 through 18. I'd like you to read them on your own. But this is a difficult one for us to get through in our American and Western mentalities. I have people that listen all over, and we tend to have this Western thought process. And so when you come to these verses that says that Moshe was angry because, hey, wait a minute, there's captives, there's things you brought back, there's the spoil. And he becomes angry about this, and the instruction in the end is that they are to kill all of the women and every male among the little ones, and every woman who has ever slept with a man. Oh, wow. That's just not really politically correct, because they're innocent. Are they? Are they? Are they really innocent? Today, the argument is being made of the innocents in Gaza. Well, the truth is that the permanent ceasefire that was in effect until 6:30 in the morning on October 7th, allowed for Gazans, Arabs living in Gaza, to go through the checkpoints, pretty much at liberty, and go into, they were employed by some of the kibbutzim, the communities along the Gaza border. They were maids, they were housekeepers, they were landscapers, various other occupations, being paid, supported by Israeli citizens, Jews. What was not known is that these same people were the ones that were diagramming the communities. If you want to go back, this is going to come out eventually, the breakdown of communication with the government and the military was probably, in my estimation, was a greater breakdown than the Yom Kippur War. And so these people coming into houses and diagramming the houses, they were in communities. They were diagramming where the schools were, where the armories were, where everything was, and they were giving this back to the Hamas soldiers, Hamas terrorists, and leadership. So who is innocent here? When the bodies, live and dead, of Jews were dragged into the cities in Gaza, where's the innocent Gazans who stood up, who stood up against this horror? Okay, they were either complicit in or silent, which made them complicit. And so there is, I mean, you read the book of Revelation, there is coming a time in which he is going to refine the whole world by fire, and there'll be some person standing there going, well, I'm innocent. No, you're not. You're complicit in the evil that was done, which means that you're deserving of the judgment. So this idea of the innocent in Gaza does not hold much water for me these days. Now, chapter 32 is one that I would love to just take out of Scripture, because it makes me angry every time that I read it. Reuben and Gad, these two Mr. Milquetoast and Mr. Wimp, whatever, they come to Moshe and say, you know, we kind of like it over here on this side of the river. Okay, I got it. That in the end, the property, the land to the east of the Jordan is Israel proper. It has not been possessed. I didn't say occupied. I said possessed. It has not truly been possessed by Israel, but it will be one day. So yeah, they're in Canaan. They're in the promised land, but that's not their job at the moment. They're not told to possess that. They're told to go across the Jordan River and possess the land that is from the river to the sea, including Gaza. They're to possess that land. So Reuben and Gad, for various reasons, excuses, I guess, in their own mind, and I mean, I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm really harsh on these guys. I am. Because Reuben, his basic makeup, we see is, and when you go back and read the prophecies given to Reuben, you're unstable as water. You slept with your father's concubine. Reuben is a man of compromise, not of conviction. And there's just something about men of compromise that bug me to no end. Now, on the other hand, Gad is a troop, and a troop will troop on him, which pretty much says Gad's personality is that Gad's problem, okay? Gad looks in the mirror and doesn't see anything good in himself, and so I'm not worthy. So with Reuben, it's like, you know, let's just compromise and stay here. With Gad, well, I'm not worthy of going in. Okay? Their excuses affected a lot of people, because not only do we see that Moshe says, okay, here's the deal that we're going to work out. You're going to go in to Canaan. You're going to go across the river, and you're going to fight with your brothers, for your brothers and their families. But I'm going to make sure that we put in a bit of a safety mechanism here, so that you're not you're not going to just think, well, you're a different nation. So for some reason he picks on Manasseh, and says, all right, we're going to split the tribe of Manasseh. Half of you are going to stay over here on this side. Half of you, half of you are going to go in. Eventually, this is how it's going to work. Everybody's going to go in, and then half of the tribe of Manasseh is going to come back on this side. Why is this? It is to bring forth the integrity of the family, so that Manasseh becomes that connector between Reuben, Gad, and the other tribes, in the same way as Benjamin is the connector between Ephraim and and Ephraim and Judah. Same principle being played out here. Well, the actions of Gad and Reuben, imagine this. Moshe comes to Manasseh and says, guys, I need half of you to volunteer to stay here. What? Wait a minute. We didn't, no, we want to go. Guys, I need you to stay over here. So see, the actions or inaction, the compromise of Gad and Reuben are now affecting other people that didn't deserve that. Your compromise, our compromise, our inaction, our silence affects other people. Because our words, this is all in context of the Torah portion, our words, our actions speak loudly, and will affect people sometimes in a positive manner, but also in a negative manner in things that they did not deserve. When, say in a family, you have multiple children, one of the children brings in something to the house. Maybe at first it's something that's not allowed in the house. So it is found out that this child has something in the house. I'm not going to give maybe a movie or whatever. Okay, you put whatever you want to in there, and maybe mom says, well, I know that that my husband doesn't approve of this, but I'm going to allow it, and I'm just going to kind of cover up. Or one of the other children, let's say the firstborn figures this out and it's the second child. Well, I'm just going to, cover for my sibling here. Eventually that sin will affect the whole house. Look back at, at Raquel and the false gods. I mean, I can go through the scripture and find various places in which the same thing, that when we do something that is against when our words and actions are against his words and actions, it's not just going to affect us. It's going to eventually affect someone else. Now, there's a very interesting couple of scriptures here, in that in verse 16, but they came to him and said, here we will build enclosures for our livestock and cities for our little ones. Over in verse 24, Moshe says, build cities for your little ones and enclosures for your sheep. Okay, what's the difference? The difference is in priorities. To the tribes, their priority is their livelihood. Enclosures for our sheep. The second priority is our homes, our cities, what will be used to protect and provide security for our wives and children. So they're putting their livelihood in front of their families. And Moshe turns this around and says, no, you're to put your family before your livelihood. Now, guys, as a father, as a husband, I would love to tell you that in all parts of my life, in all times of my life, I have succeeded in that priority list. The problem is that I've already talked about vows and words and being honest. And I'll be very, very straightforward and blunt, is there are times that I've gotten those priorities out of line. I look back over 30 plus years of ministry now. October 17th will be 31 years of full-time ministry. And I can tell you this, if I was to go back and live this thing over, there'd be a lot of places and people that would have called me and said, could you come here and speak? And I said, nope, can't make it. Why? Because in the end, they don't even remember my name, much less what I talked about. They could have cared less. The moment I left, it was the Dog and Pony Show. In fact, a lot of conferences these days are just dog and pony shows. People go to be entertained. The so-called worship is just emotional feel-good for themselves. They really don't care about the person up on the platform. Well, what kind of golden nugget can they give me today? If this offends you in what I'm saying, well, I'm still going to say it. I can tell you that in my own life, I would have changed some priorities, some times of priority, and probably still could get a good lesson of that at times. But I can't go back and change things. What I can do is try to keep the priorities in line from this point forward. And I think that's good counsel for all of us. That when we continue to look at what is going on in the world today, are we keeping our priorities in line? Now this goes to the news. We are now under 100 days from now to the elections. How much time is going to be wasted? How much time are you and I going to waste in trying to dissect all the plagues? In trying to keep up with every little nuance of, well, this person said this and this person said this, and it's meaningless, folks. In the end, most of it, I didn't say that who is elected and all, I didn't say that's meaningless, but most of the things leading up to this. Remember, the media. It doesn't matter which one is your favorite. If it could be whatever. It doesn't. I won't give you. It can be CNN or Fox. Either one. They're driven by one thing: money. If you take the commercials out of the programming, they're off the air. Okay? If you take advertisements out of everything, do you really think that Fox News or MSNBC or the Times of, the Washington Post, whoever, do you really think that if all the advertisement was to dry up tomorrow for any of these places, that they would still publish a newspaper? Yeah, I guess some of them still do. Would they still put the broadcasts, online? Would they still have the hosts and the co-hosts and all these things? No. What would you have? You would have a dark screen. On your television, you would have a dark screen. On your computer, it would say, this website not found. because it's all about money. The subject matter is to get you to tune in so that the advertisers can see how many people are watching, and then they will pay for their advertisement. Your benefit is of no regard to them. Your wallet is what they're looking for. So be careful in this day that we do not allow their priority, which is your wallet, your credit card, to interrupt our life and our priorities in such a way that we get drug into things that we probably shouldn't get drug into. I hope that makes a little bit more sense than I think it did. It sounded better in my head. Because see, in the end, to finish with this, if we look at it, the tribes of Manasseh, half the tribe of Manasseh, Reuben, Gad, all of the men of these tribes that were of age for battle left for 14 years. Consider that the actions of the leaders, so-called leaders of these tribes, that there were many men that walked across the Jordan River, turned to kiss their wife, who announced to them, by the way, I'm pregnant. And the next time that they would see that child is when that child was 14 years old, would grow up in the most formidable years of their lives, not knowing their fathers. What impact did that have? I mean, we can go back to World War I, we can go back to World War II, which I've studied extensively, of what happened in World War II when the men went off to war. And at that time, it was unusual for a woman to be working. I'm not getting into the politics and the craziness of this discussion, but we lived in a society that was not perfect, but for the most part, children were raised by their mom and their dad. Education was not delved out to somebody that nobody knew. Morality was taught for the most part. Again, not a perfect society, but was taught in the home. But when the father went to war, the mother had to go to work in the factories to produce the equipment, and the children were where? Sent to schools of indoctrination, were on their own. My mother had to go to work. My mom and dad were divorced when I was 8. My mother had to go to work because my father was not given child support. She had to go to work, and a lot of what I went through in early years of my life is because I was really on my own. I had a mother that loved me, I had grandparents that loved me, but I was still on my own in many ways. That's not a good thing. What Reuben and Gad set up for their families, it's tragic. It is absolutely tragic. Let us not make the same mistake in our day through compromise. All right. With that, Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem, God willing. See you next week. Pray for the victory of Jerusalem, of Israel, in our day, the safety of the people, the soldiers that are fighting this battle. May it be that the words of this Torah portion come forth when it says in chapter 31, verse 49, not one of us is missing. May that be the standard for those that are fighting in Israel today. Not one of us did not come home. Be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.